To all those people watching, I'd like to remind everyone that this video is not made for kids. It's for older fans and adults. Enjoy the fucking video!
Dear friends, there are some pieces of history we cannot reclaim. Many engines meant the cutter's torch long before the idea of preservation was born. As such, old classes of engines from bygone eras remain only in photographs and memories. Bloomer is one of the lucky few. Sir Charles Topham Hatt found him languishing in a shed, and saw fit to restore him. He now pulls enthusiast trains, and couldn't be happier. More often than not, he visits Thomas's branch line. These stories recount the events of one such visit. I hope you'll enjoy them. Yours truly, the author.
Thomas had recently returned from the National Railway Museum. He was enlivened over the ordeal. One morning he was talking excitedly to Mavis. "You really must go sometime, Mavis. There's demonstration lines of all different sizes and a lovely seaside route for rail tours. Not to mention all the famous engines. I think you're the closest I'll get to brush with fame," Mavis chuckled. "My choir work keeps me much too busy, and I don't fancy being a celebrity." "Well," said Thomas, trying to sound modest, "I hope you're right. We don't need too much fame on this branch line." Almost on cue, a shrill whistle filled the air. "Who on earth is that?" wondered Mavis. "Oh no," groaned Thomas. "Not him." A gleaming vermilion engine puffed grandly into view. He was very old-fashioned, with one large pair of driving wheels and a tall chimney. Behind him trailed two special coaches, the faces of the passengers gazing out the big windows. "Good day, residents of Farquhar," the engine boomed. "A most joyous reunion it is." "Hello, Bloomer," Thomas grunted unenthusiastically. "Ah, young Thomas, keeping a little line running well, I see. Oh, and who might this be?" "This is Mavis," replied Thomas. "She runs the quarry at the end of the line." "A thoroughly modern sort indeed," Bloomer admired. "Handling those ruffian trucks better than Thomas, are you?" Thomas turned bright red and wheeshed away to fetch Annie and Clarabel. "I certainly try," chuckled Mavis. "I'd never seen an engine like you before." "Can't imagine you have, my darling," Bloomer chuckled. "Seeing as I've been locked in a shed for the better part of my life, Sir Charles Hatt graciously had me restored and bestowed upon me the honour of pulling enthusiast trains." "I hope I'll see you again," Mavis smiled as she reversed back to the quarry. "Lovely to meet you." "He's unbearable, Toby," Thomas grumbled at the junction. "Thinks so highly of himself. Acted like a celebrity the last time he came. All full of self-importance." "You know all about self-importance, wouldn't you?" Toby smirked. "What do you mean? We've not had one conversation since you returned where you haven't brought up the Railway Museum." "Well, that was important," spluttered Thomas. "Historical even. Besides, at least I was useful when I was there. Bloomer just parades around like he owns the railway. Toby said no more. He just grinned knowingly. Thomas was still in a foul mood as he shunted his next train. It was a mixed train, consisting of a few vans along with Annie and Clarabel. Because of their loose couplings, the trucks were placed behind Thomas so as not to bump the coaches. Today it was Thomas doing the bumping. He moved crossly about the sidings and the vans clanged into one another. "Ouch! Go easy, they cried. Come quietly, Thomas grumbled. Be gentle, winced Annie and Clarabel as they watched from the platform. At last the guard's whistle blew. Do come along, ordered Thomas. The vans jerked forward, followed by Annie and Clarabel. He's headed for trouble, fussed Annie. So are we, moaned Clarabel. Thomas puffed along, thinking of nothing but Bloomer. Silly old engine, he muttered. I know exactly how to handle trucks. Suddenly there was a bump and a clatter. Annie watched as a winding gap opened between her and the rest of the vans. Its coupling had broken and the coaches slowed to a crawl. Help! Help! Annie shrieked. The van tried to tell Thomas, but he completely misunderstood. No nonsense! He snapped. Finally, Thomas arrived at the top station. Bertie Bus was waiting for him. Goods are no good for me. Where are my passengers? What do you mean? Thomas replied. There, to Thomas's horror, Annie and Clarabel were nowhere to be seen. Cinders and ashes, he cried. Oh, I must go find them before... Thomas was cut short by an all too familiar whistle. There was Annie and Clarabel, being pushed by Bloomer. Thank you ever so much, smiled Clarabel. We have been stranded without you. Indeed, agreed Annie. A proper gentleman. Not a bad colour either, admired Bertie, who raced off once Thomas's passengers were aboard. I knew your handling of trucks was sporty, tutted Bloomer, but struggling with coaches. My, we are losing our touch, aren't we? Thomas held his tongue. He received a stern talking to from Annie, Clarabel, and after passenger complaints, the fat controller. He was left in no doubt how little his celebrity status mattered. Percy, Daisy and Toby found it a great joke. What an important day it's been, grinned Percy. Historical even, added Daisy. To parade around with enthusiasts is one thing, smiled Toby, but to parade off without your passengers, well, that's something indeed. Thomas, having learned a valuable lesson, went sheepishly to sleep. Mavis's driver found her hard to handle. It seemed she couldn't scuttle about with the trucks fast enough. What's got you all riled up? Oh, replied Mavis hastily. Just want to get this lot sorted and down to Farquhar. Mavis did want to get to Farquhar, but only for the chance to talk with Bloomer again. Is he here? She asked eagerly. He's got enthusiast trains. He can't sit around the yard all day, chuckled Toby.
Why don't you sleep in my shed tonight? I'll go up to the quarry so you can stay and chat with him." "Oh, thank you, Toby," she beamed. That evening, Bloomer was regaling the engines with stories of his recovery. "There I was, a prisoner in my shed, with nothing to do but revel in days gone by. Alas, I come to accept I'll never run again." Mavis sat wide-eyed, with bated breath. "Then, who should shake me from my stupor but your very own fat controller? I'm eternally grateful for his curiosity and generosity. Why, had he not been poking around the old railway, I'd be conversing with moths and spiders rather than all of you. I quite prefer the latter. If only we could get a word in," muttered Thomas, though he was quickly hushed by Percy. "You must have been in the works for a very long time," remarked Mavis. "Indeed, my dear," continued Bloomer. "Rust, dust, must you name it. I had it. They did a stupendous job, of course. I'm in the best condition of my life." "Did they throw you a party after you'd been mended? The fat controller did that for Mrs. Canning when she got better," remembered Percy. "Nothing overly grand," replied Bloomer, "though I do have quite the antidote." The day after my repairs were finished, they gathered everyone outside the wax. The fat controller made a speech, and even let me say a few words. "And now," announced the fat controller, "let us mark this moment and christen Bloomer for his return to service. There was a young engineer who was crucial to my restoration. Entertaining lad he was. They handed him a bottle of something... champagne, I think they called it. Suddenly he began beating the bottle against my running board. The engines gasped." "Whatever for?" asked Daisy. "It's mostly done with ships," Bloomer continued, "as breaking a bottle on its hull is believed to bring good luck and safe travels. All it brought me was terrible pain. Thankfully the fat controller advised the young lad to try it over my buffer. This time it broke easily. Everyone cheered, but not me. I just felt wet and sticky." "I know the feeling," said Thomas in a rare moment of sympathy. "I ran over bottles of pop that were thrown onto the demonstration line at the National Railway Museum, and..."
"Not this again!"
groaned Percy and Daisy. Bloomer and Mavis laughed as the other engines bickered. Each morning, a milk van is loaded at Farquhar. Milk churns are brought from the farms to the station, and Daisy takes it on her first trip to the junction. Mavis was exhausted when she awoke. Bloomer's storytelling had kept her up later than she was used to. She fetched Henrietta and Susie the quarryman's coach, and groggily made her way to the platform. The porter was hauling milk churns ready for Daisy, but they were quite heavy. With a groan he set one down and hurried off for another. He didn't notice how close it was to the platform's edge. As Mavis drew up to the station, the porter set another churn down, but not carefully. It clanged into the first churn, which toppled off the edge. "Look out!" he cried. Mavis was far too tired to stop in time. Before she could even think of anything else, the churn hit her buffer, it burst open and fell onto the rails. "Ouch!" she cried. Thankfully, she was more wet than hurt. Milk had splattered all over her cowcatcher. "I'm terribly sorry, Mavis," fussed the porter. "It was only a mistake, sir," she sighed. "But now I'm soaked." "Sorry, old girl," said the driver. "We must get the quarryman to work. We'll have to clean you later." "I hope it doesn't attract cats," fretted Susie. "I don't like them darting about the line side." "I don't foresee cats keeping pace with Mavis," Henrietta comforted. Mavis heard a chuckle from the shed. Bloomer had seen everything. "Gracious, my dear, fancied a christening of your own, did you? I thought my story would have put you off such an idea." Mavis blushed. Bloomer looked sympathetically at her. "Not your fault. No resilience in porters these days. They didn't lack vigour when I was a young engine," he finished with a wink. "I heard that!" shouted the porter. The two engines laughed, and Mavis headed for the quarry, feeling much better.
Bloomer was having a marvellous time on the branch line. He puffed gleefully along, his coaches full of enthusiasts. The presence of a vintage locomotive attracted many photographers, and the line side was dotted with tripods and flashing cameras. Ta! Very much, Bloomer called jovially. You certainly know how to make an old engine feel unique. Antique moonlight, muttered Thomas, seething in the passing loop. One evening Bloomer returned to Farquhar after his last excursion of the day. A surprising sight greeted him. There was Mavis, pulling a red-faced Toby, his coaches, and the trucks. "Whatever has happened to you, old son?" asked Bloomer. "Overexerted himself while shunting," Mavis replied. "He's got a nasty leak somewhere. Now I'll have to stay here tonight and bring the workmen tomorrow. And the quarry's a mess." "Why don't I bring the workmen?" Bloomer offered. "That way you can scuttle off and get those trucks straight as a row of sailors." The drivers and station master came to an agreement, and the plan was set. As Mavis pushed Toby to the shed, she spoke to Bloomer. "Be mindful on the quarry route, especially up the road. The cars and lorries can be trouble, and you've no side plates to—" "I doubt a little tramway will prove cumbersome," interrupted Bloomer, tired of Mavis's constant attention. "My smashing wheels will be quite a sight. The mere thought of concealing them—" he shuddered dramatically. Mavis, quite offended, glanced angrily away. The next morning, Bloomer fetched the coaches and brought them to the platform. Henrietta and Susie were impressed with his looks, but not with his treatment of Mavis. "We must take care," advised Henrietta. "You'd be wise to heed Mavis's warning." "Worry not, my dears," smirked Bloomer. "Leave the hard work to me. Just you enjoy the attention." "This doesn't bode well," muttered Susie. As Bloomer predicted, the townsfolk and other enthusiasts came out in droves to see him. They carefully navigated the tramway, snaking through the village and off down the farm lane. "You're too kind," Bloomer called, flashing a grin. Though the requirement for cowcatchers and side plates had long been abolished, Mavis and Toby were the only engines who regularly ventured to the quarry. Despite their experience, they always took great care when running beside the road. Bloomer paid no attention. It was fortunate the cars and buses had slowed just to marvel at him. They reached the quarry without incident, and the workmen thanked him. "Nothing to it. Only too happy to help keep this well-oiled establishment running," he grinned, with all the flair of a politician. Mavis rolled her eyes. Her admiration was quickly waning. Everyone loves the sight of Tom Tipper in his little van. However, Tom isn't the only postman who works on Thomas's branch line. Some travel by bicycle, servicing places Tom's van can't reach. One of these postmen was cycling through Farquhar with a terrible disposition. "My rotten luck," he grumbled. "That old Tipper cook gets a spiffy new van, and I'm stuck on this rotten two-wheeler. In the baking sun, no less." To make matters worse, the postman found navigating the hordes of enthusiasts a difficult task. "Go on, move! Haven't you people got jobs?" he complained, nearing the crossing at the farm lane. He was so busy ringing his bell and shouting that he didn't hear the approach of an engine. Bloomer was flashing smiles at the crowd, paying no mind to the crossing. Suddenly a bicycle came darting towards him. "Great heavens!" he gasped, braking as hard as he could. "Yikes!" shouted the postman. He leapt clear, but the bicycle continued on, straight towards Bloomer. There was a screech, a crunch, and a whoosh as the train finally came to a halt. The bicycle was bent, twisted and wedged in Bloomer's driving wheel. "You rotten engine!" shouted the postman. "First you bring these great big crowds and block my route. Then you ruin my bicycle. I'll have to make my deliveries on foot thanks to you." Bloomer said nothing. He whimpered in discomfort as the bicycle was removed from his wheel. The enthusiast did nothing to help. They continued taking pictures and making notes. Bloomer blushed with embarrassment. At that moment, Mavis appeared with her stone trucks. The crews discussed and made arrangements. Mavis buffered up and pushed Bloomer and the coaches to the station, all with her stone trucks in tow.
"What a strong little engine she is,"
remarked the enthusiast, photographing the operation. Mavis was more focused on her work, but still managed to smile for the cameras. "I warned you about cars and lorries," she chuckled as she shunted Bloomer to the shed. "But I didn't foresee bicycles giving you trouble." "I'm awfully sorry, my darling," said Bloomer sheepishly. "I should have been so dismissive of your warning. I was a fool, and I got the damaged brakes to prove it." "Never mind," smiled Mavis. "We learn something new every day, even an old engine like you." "Indubitably," replied Bloomer. "Perhaps I should forego showing a wheel on that tramway. Side plates wouldn't suit me anyhow. You wear them much better." Mavis blushed, and with a friendly hoot, she set off back to the quarry. At Farquhar, there is a small shed close to the station. Each morning, children from the village arrive to catch the train to school. They leave their bicycles in the shed and ride home when the day is done. After his accident, Bloomer was awaiting inspection. He smiled as the children rang the bells on the bicycles. Toby, waiting at the platform, rang his bell in response, and they all laughed. "Ah, to be young and carefree," he mused. "They're having a riot," added Susie, who sat in the carriage shed. "I love to take children, but I'm only a quarryman's coach, you see." "You're welcome to them, horrid little tykes." Elsie, the luggage man, sat behind Henrietta, grumbling as usual. "Far too much noise this early in the morning," she grunted, "especially from those blasted bicycles. They should be scrapped." "Surely you're not suggesting they walk?" quizzed Susie. "That'll be a trick." "We're all they need," retorted Elsie. "If it runs on the road, it's rotten. That's what I say. The road shut our old line down." "That was due to cars and lorries, not bicycles, and you know it," scolded Henrietta. "Now stop being a curmudgeon. You'll spoil everyone's fun." The train left the station with Elsie muttering under her breath. "No chance that'll change. Elsie's been a curmudgeon since I met her," chuckled Susie. "It takes all kinds to run a branch line," grinned Bloomer. Later, Toby brought the children home. They made their way down the platform when... "My bicycle's missing!" Toby's crew and the station master ran over and found a child in tears. The fireman knelt down. The shed lock lay on the ground. "It's been cut," he said. "It seems we have a thief on the prowl." "We didn't see a soul around the shed," noted Susie. "Then again,"
sighed Bloomer. We have been dozing most of the day. Bertie was nearby and promised to take the child home. Some time later, the station master received an angry call from the child's mother. Needless to say, he took swift action. The next day, a much sturdier lock was clamped to the shed doors. "Let's see you break through that," smiled the station master triumphantly. Bloomer and Susie promised to keep a lookout for anyone suspicious, but that was easier said than done. Many enthusiasts arrived to take Bloomer's picture. The attention proved quite distracting. When the children returned, they found the lock hadn't been cut. It had been picked instead. Many bicycles were missing, much to the children's dismay. "Good riddance," sniffed Elsie. "A victory for the rails, if you ask me."
"We didn't ask you,"
frowned Toby.
"Stop being horrid. The children are signing up without your input."
"We must put a stop to this," frowned the station master. Susie thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "I have an idea, sir." The next day, Elsie found herself at the platform after Toby had gone. On the shed was a sign, "Please park bikes in luggage van."
"Ridiculous,"
grunted Elsie. "To be involved in such a stunt." "Hush," hissed Susie. "You'll spoil everything." Before long, there was a rattle, a clank, and Elsie's door opened.
"Gotcha!"
There was a great commotion as Bloomer's crew leapt out of Elsie and tackled the thief to the ground.
"Well done, gentlemen," called Bloomer. "Now who've we—"
"By George, it's you!" The disgruntled postman sat snarling on the platform. "It's all your fault," he growled at Bloomer. "Postmaster wouldn't give me a new bike after your little stunt. Said I didn't take care. Have you any idea how expensive bicycles are?" "So you stole from children?" Susie glared. "Children aren't living on measly postage wages. Thought I'd steal one for myself and sell the others. Make a pretty penny." "I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience," said Bloomer.
"But this is utterly despicable. Perhaps a chat with the authorities will make you see sense."
The station master and crew dragged the delinquent postman to the station. That evening, the fat controller arrived.
"Bloomer and Susie, I'm very proud of you. Thanks to your plan, all the stolen bicycles were recovered. You are a credit to the railway and the people we serve."
"I played a part too," Elsie muttered, thinking no one could hear her.
"Toby has told me all about your, disposition," said the fat controller sternly. "That simply will not do. I won't allow rudeness to our passengers, and I know just how to cure that."
The next day, Bloomer had finished being inspected and was ready to leave with his last excursion train. In the carriage shed, Susie was being polished and cleaned. "The fat controller had asked me to take the children to school," she beamed. "Just what I've always wanted. What a swizz!"
"A treat you truly deserve," smiled Bloomer. "You look very sharp."
Just then the signal dropped.
"Goodbye, residents of Fatwa. I shall see you anon," whistled Bloomer with such a plump.
"Goodbye, Bloomer," called the engines as they watched him disappear into the distance. Elsie watched him go too, but not from the carriage shed. The fat controller had made her a temporary shed for the children's bicycles until she learned sense. She sat in a siding, grumbling the days away. Between you and I, the fat controller may find his patience tested. I don't foresee Elsie changing any time soon. Do you?